Today we discuss about database concept in Laravel. First of all, we see what are the main topics like introduction, running SQL queries, database transactions, connecting to the database CLI, inspecting our databases, monitoring our databases. So like this we will be having the main topics in Laravel database, and also topics like configuration, read and write connections, using multiple database connections, listening for query events, monitoring cumulative query time. So like this we will be having subtopics in database concept of Laravel. So let's see one by one. First of all, we see the configuration part. So generally in config folder there is a file called database.php. So in this we will be having db underscore connection, db underscore database, db underscore foreign underscore keys, db underscore host, db underscore post, db underscore username, db underscore password. So like this we will be having the configuration variables, and we will be passing all those values in the database.php. So apart from this, .env file contains the default configuration of the database. And let's see read and write connections in database concept of Laravel. For example, MySQL connection is there. So in the MySQL we will be having the options like configuration options like read, write, sticky, driver, database, username, password, char set, collation, prefix. So like this we will be having the different configuration options in MySQL database connection. So for example, if you take a read connection, so there is a option called a host. Within that host we will be mentioning all the IP addresses. Write, for example, write connection configuration option. So host, within the host we will be passing the IP address. So like this we will be having the different configuration options of database. And if you consider, if you take sticky options, so we will be using the sticky option in order to retrieve the database records quickly, immediately. So like this we will be using the sticky option. Running SQL queries. For example, if I want to run some select statement, so we can use select method. If I want to run update query, so we'll be using the update method. So like this we will be having different methods like select, update, insert, delete, and statement, etc. So all these methods will be provided by DB Facade, where we can run different SQL queries in Laravel. So let's see how do we run a select query. So in order to run a select query, we will be using the select method on DB Facade. DB : select, we will be passing the SQL query select star from users where active equal to question mark. So like this we will be using the select query, and as a first argument, as a second argument we will be passing the 1 or whatever the ID we want to, whatever the value we want to pass as a active value. So like this we will be using the select method in Laravel. And if I want to select scalar values, for example count, max, min, average, so like this we will be if I want to retrieve those values, scalar values, so we will be using the scalar method on DB Facade, like a DB : scalar and the SQL statement. Selecting multiple result sets, we will be using select result sets method on the DB Facade. So db double colon select result sets SQL statement. So like this we'll be using the select result sets method in order to retrieve multiple result sets. Named bindings. Instead of passing question mark, we will be using colon named bindings in order to use the named bindings. For example, db double colon select method, within that select star from users where id equal to colon id. This is the first argument. Second argument is id 1, 2, 3, whatever we want to give. So like this we'll be using the named bindings. So running an insert statement, we will be using insert method. db double colon insert query. Running an update statement, so we will be using update method. db double colon update SQL statement. Running a delete statement, we will be using the delete method. db double colon delete, we will be passing the SQL statement. Running a general statement, if I want to run a general statement where it will not return any value. For example, an SQL statement, it won't return any value. So we will be using the statement method. db double colon statement drop table users. So like this we will be using the general statement. Running an unprepared statement, so we will be using unprepared method. So where we want to execute a SQL statement without binding any values. So like this, update users, set votes equal to 100 where name equal to blah blah blah. So like this we will be using unprepared method. Implicit commits, when we use db facades statement and unprepared methods within transactions, so we must be careful to avoid statements that cause implicit commits. For example, creating a table, so it might cause implicit commit. So a lot of situations, scenarios will be there that will cause implicit commits, so we have to be very careful in these cases like statement and unprepared methods. Using multiple database connections, so we will be using connection method on db facade in order to connect to the multiple databases like this. So connection db double colon connection MySQL select, or db double colon connection SQLite select, select query we will be running. So we will be using the select or update, whatever the method we want to use based on the queries we run. So we will be using on the connection method like db double colon connection SQLite, or select method. Within the select method we will be passing the SQL query as a SQL argument. So whatever the argument we will be passing as a SQL query. So like this we will be using the connection method. If I want to retrieve a PDO instance of a database connection, then we will be using get PDO method. db double colon connection get PDO. So like this we will be using the get PDO method. Listening for query events. So if I want to specify a closure that is invoked for each SQL query executed by our application, so we may use db facades listen method. If I want to specify a particular closure that will be invoked by each and every SQL query, so we will be using listen method within the boot method of app service provider. It will be like this: db double colon listen function. Within the function we will be passing argument as query executed $query. So like this we will be using query executed class instance $query, so which we will be passing as a argument to the listen method of function. Monitoring cumulative query time. For example, if some query is taking longer time, so when querying the database, so we will be using when querying for longer than method, so in order to monitor a particular query performance, like this when querying for longer than method. So within the boot method of app service provider, we will be using when querying for longer than method on DB Facade. Database transactions, we will be using transaction method provided by DB Facade to run a set of operations within a database transaction. For example, DB transaction function. So we will be using SQL statements like DB update query, DB delete query. Like this, we will be using the transaction method. Handling deadlocks. So whenever we use a transaction method, there might be a chance of occurrence of deadlock. So in those cases, there is a second argument. You will be passing a numeric value as a second argument in order to rerun the transactions and whatever the SQL statements that are mentioned in transaction method. So like this, we will be handling the deadlocks and manually using transactions. So how do we use transactions manually? Like begin transaction method can be used on DB Facade. It will be like this: DB begin transaction, and we can roll back by using rollback method. DB rollback. If I want to commit a transaction, we will be using commit method. DB commit. So like this, we will be using the commit method. So connecting to the database CLI. Now, how do we connect to database command line interface? So we will see the following. How the commands will be. So PHP artisan DB. So this command is used to connect to our database. PHP artisan DB. If I want to connect to particular database like MySQL, I can use a command like PHP artisan DB MySQL. Or if I want to connect to the SQLite database, PHP artisan DB SQLite. So like this, we will be using the artisan command. We can inspect our databases by making use of artisan command like this: PHP artisan DB show. So it will give the whatever the database we are using. And if I want to, it will give all the valuable insight into our database and its associated tables. It will give all the overview of a particular database. And particularly if I want to mention the database name, so we will be using PHP artisan DB show hyphen database equal to MySQL or whatever the database we want to see its configuration. So like this, we will be using the PHP artisan DB show. So if you mention PHP artisan DB show, it will give all the databases information. And if you want to specify particular database, we will be using the hyphen database option value. PHP artisan DB show hyphen database equal to MySQL. So like this, we will be using the different options in order to show the database configurations. PHP artisan DB show hyphen counts hyphen views. So to include table row counts and database view details within our output of the commands, we will be using the options like hyphen counts hyphen views. PHP artisan DB show hyphen counts hyphen views. So like this, we will be using the PHP artisan command. Table overview. So if you would like to get an overview of an individual table within our database, so we may execute DB table command. So like this: PHP artisan DB table users. So like this, we will be getting the overview of an individual table. Monitoring our databases. So we will be making use of a command called PHP artisan DB monitor hyphen databases equal to MySQL PGSQL hyphen max equal to 100. So this is maximum number of open connections that should be tolerated before dispatching an event. So like this, we will be making use of monitor command like this. So PHP artisan db colon monitor hyphen database is equal to MySQL, comma PGSQL, etc. Hyphen max equal to 100. So like this we will be using the monitor command. So this is all about introduction part of database in Laravel. So thank you so much. This is Universal Horse Star Ravindar Reddy Yampalla. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of my fans, supporters and followers, and special thanks to all of my YouTube subscribers. Thank you so much.